Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 17th of March 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we will be joined in the second half of the programme by John Hurst, former policeman and long-term campaigner with the British Constitution Group. And John will be giving us an update to his work in courts, common law and grand juries, plus an update on the extremely brave Northern Ireland policeman Anthony Carlin. Well, before we get there, Mike, we'd better just say the reports are glorious sunshine coming in from everywhere. Perth is sunny, Glasgow, Hampshire, Devon, Rhondda, Windsor, and the Isle of Man. So everybody's happy. Is the weather the result of the budget? I don't know, but the NatWest is crowing. So we were bombarded with an advert this morning, and it says, get your NatWest ISA. And this gentleman is saying that if we put in £4 of our money, the government will put in £1 of their money. But of course, that money is already money that's been fleeced from the public in the first place.
Yeah, but I've got some bad news for you, Brian.
Okay.
You and I are both too old to take part. You've got to be under 40.
Got to be under 40.
Yes.
I thought you were actually, Mike.
Sadly not.
Okay. So bad news then, straight away with the budget, all is not as it seems, but presumably you put that money in and then you lose it because the government takes it all.
Yes, indeed. Well, the response to Osborne's budget has been mixed, I suppose. The Mirror's sugar and spite. Many of the papers really criticising him. The Mail less so. George's awesome gamble, apparently, but you know they're saying that his sums look very optimistic. So Liam Halligan has one of the more sensible commentaries on this. He says George Osborne's latest budget pretended to be many things it wasn't. The Chancellor talked repeatedly about borrowing falling, yet in the next 3 years, borrowing on our behalf goes sharply up. He warned about financial instability and storm clouds on the economic horizon, yet he's relying on growth assumptions that are surely too optimistic. While barely mentioning the EU referendum, the Chancellor's determination to avoid Brexit pervaded almost every paragraph of his 63-minute common statement. Far from being a budget for the next generation, a phrase wielded 18 times, his policies were aimed at attracting as many Remain voters as he could, while doing as little as possible to upset those still undecided. And he ends up by saying this was a budget, above all, that was about politics, with almost no economics. In sum, it wasn't a budget. It was the budget that wasn't. And of course, Brian, it was the politics of driven by Goldman Sachs.
Well, I think we've got to give enormous credit here to Guido Fawkes, who identified in the lineup. So the gentleman to the right of the Chancellor there, Jim O'Neill, Baron O'Neill of Goldman Sachs. And Guido says government of the Goldmans, by the Goldmans, for the Goldmans.
Well, indeed, this was the announcement about a year ago of Jim O'Neill taking this Treasury job. He's former chairman of Goldman Sachs Asset Management. He's currently a government minister, as we've said. But let's not forget that there is one other pretty major ex-Goldman Sachs man in the mix here, and that's none other than Mr. Carnage himself. So both these guys, once they leave their government jobs, undoubtedly will go straight back to Goldman's and get their just rewards.
You just drift in and out of banking to the British government and back again, and totally interchangeable.
Absolutely.
Revolving door, I think it is. But we thought it would be interesting to remind ourselves of the 2013 Bilderberg meeting at the Grove Hotel in Watford. And this is the lineup of bankers that we showed, pointing out the fact that these corporatists were meeting behind closed doors with the likes of our Prime Minister and George Osborne himself. So if we highlight the Goldman Sachs influence here, we've got Michael Evans and also Peter Sutherland. So remember, no minutes of these meetings. The public held outside the doors almost at gunpoint by security people and the police, while our politicians sat behind closed doors discussing what with the bankers. We've said there how many brown envelopes changed hands. Well, of course, the public has no idea because there were no minutes. So let's just remind ourselves that Mr. Sutherland, of course, UN Special Representative for Migration, and the man that says the EU should be doing its best to encourage mass migration to undermine the homogeneity of European countries. So here is a Goldman Sachs banker, obviously now with immense power through the British government, saying we are going to unleash immigration because it's good for you.
Well, I wanted to highlight just a couple of aspects of the budget that perhaps haven't received the main discussion. Here is Osborne saying in the budget, the government will lay the foundations for a smart power revolution. And the word smart was another term that was used quite a number of times during this. So with support for innovation in storage and other smart technologies and an increased level of ambition on interconnection. So this is the key point here. So if we look at the National Grid status website, which is a useful little website, as we can see today, there's no electricity being generated by wind power whatsoever. But it's these four items on the right-hand side here that are of interest here, because these are the interconnects. So we've got one to France, which provides up to 2 gigawatts. We have the Dutch interconnect, which provides up to 1. And we have an Irish interconnect, which basically mostly sends energy to Ireland. And we also have the East-West interconnect, which is another Irish interconnect, which is bringing energy from Europe via Ireland. These are the four interconnects that we currently have. Osborne talking about another 9 gigawatts of generating capacity through more interconnects. And what this represents is more interdependence. We are no longer an independent state, even if we leave the European Union after the referendum. The reliance on other countries to provide our power, our generating capacity is there in black and white in this budget, because 9 gigawatts is what they are intending to import from other countries, mainly from Europe, of course.
Yeah, so Mike, this is the European Union agenda simply being driven through the country, unseen by most of the general public, destroy British infrastructure. So Britain has to rely on the European Union, and then you tell the lie, well, of course, we can't leave because we need the European Union. Well, this is treason. I'm going to keep using this word because this is treason on the country.
Well, the original idea of interdependence has come from the United Nations, but its implementation is coming via the EU, and that's why we've seen the attacks on our fisheries, on our agriculture and so on, because we cannot be independent. We've got to be reliant on other countries to meet our basic needs, and in fact that goes for other countries as well. So we find large quantities of our beef supply being exported to Europe, because it would be really stupid to sell that in the UK.
Yeah, we shouldn't have any fresh food.
No.
Or meat in this case.
And the other one that I wanted to mention, the government is transferring significant budgets and responsibilities to the local level, building on the historic mayoral devolution agreements, and devolution absolutely front and centre of this. The budget report says strengthening city regions within Scotland and Wales by agreeing a city deal for Cardiff and opening negotiations on deals for Swansea and Edinburgh, and agreeing new mayoral devolution deals with the West of England, East Anglia and Greater Lincolnshire, as well as agreeing additional mayoral devolution deals with Greater Manchester and Liverpool City region. So this is the city-states and now the regional assemblies being created. So here is the map on the left from the European Parliament website, and that shows the EU's vision for Britain split up into European-style regions.
And England disappearing, of course. That's the key thing. Scotland's there, Wales there, Northern Ireland's there, but England simply disappears into regions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the three that Osborne has spoken about yesterday is the Southwest, Eastern and East Midlands regions. And what we're looking at is unitary authorities headed up by an elected mayor, in inverted commas. And what we're looking at is the regional assemblies. As per this map, and you note that the right-hand half of that slide there is a screenshot from the budget report, and the map of the United Kingdom that they choose to use is that same European regional map from the EU Parliament website. So this is clearly what they've got in mind. They either know that we're not intending to leave the European Union following the referendum, or they don't care whether we leave because this is the policy either way.
Which I think is the true agenda. They don't care either way because the drive and the linking of all of the systems just carries on unabated.
So I'll just show you this. I'm not going to make too much comment on it. This is the East Anglia Devolution Agreement, and all the traders have signed. There you go.
So these are all people that, if you freeze the screen, have a look at the individuals, you could be writing to them, pointing out, are they aware that they're committing treason, misprision of treason, possibly.
Right, change of subject then. Yesterday we mentioned Philip Hammond and Alex Thompson's response to this comment that Philip Hammond had made in the House of Commons on Tuesday. Hammond had said if somebody if someone who has gone to another country, bombed civilian populations and destroyed hospitals and schools, then decides 5 months later that they have done enough, let us not give them too much praise. It's a bit like that question, did he stop beating his wife? And if you remember, Alex wrote to Philip Hammond really asking him, was he of a right mind to be making comments like this, and what was the Russian press going to be making of it? Well, here we go. Here's one example of what the Russian press is making of it. And the headline is Zakharova wonders whether Hammond is a wife beater. And so they are just turning it right back on him. Are you speaking from personal experience here, Mr. Hammond? Or are we to put this down to translation errors yet again, is really the response?
It's really interesting to see this, Mike, isn't it? We've got members of British Parliament behaving like spoiled brats, basically being rude to foreign members of state, foreign politicians. And now we've got the Russians coming back and playing it incredibly politely and coolly. I just find this fascinating to watch after the Cold War era when we were supposed to be on the right side. We now discover, of course, that we're being ruled by criminals and traitors. Possibly
paedophiles.
Almost certainly some paedophiles. We'll come on to that a little bit later in the news.
Yes. Yemen. Yemen continues, the problems in Yemen, and this time Saudi Arabia has decided that a popular market, is the best thing to be bombing. So they have bombed a market in Sana'a, the city of Sana'a, which is in the north of Yemen. 65 people killed, 55 injured, and the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, has made a comment, and he said this incident is one of the deadliest, reportedly killing and wounding scores of civilians, including women and children, since the start of the conflict. And he said that all parties have the utmost necessity to respect their obligations under international law. And he said that attacks directed against civilians and civilian objects, including populated markets, are strictly prohibited. Well, Saudi Arabia doesn't seem to care too much about that. And of course, Saudi Arabia, absolutely backed by Philip Hammond and the British government. Global research here pointing out that ISIS terrorists are now fighting alongside Saudi forces in Yemen. And this is coming from a Yemeni media network. And they're saying that ISIS and Al-Qaeda reportedly have a small presence inside the provincial capital, but they're fighting against the Yemeni Army's Republican Guard with Saudi Arabia. And I just want to ask the question, is this actually ISIS at work here? Because this article here pointing out that mercenaries from DynCorp have now entered Yemen to fight alongside the Saudi-led coalition. And this is apparently after Blackwater's mercenaries basically got demolished. Really, they got taken. Yeah. Well, they got taken apart, and so I think this is United Arab Emirates have invited DynCorp to provide some mercenaries instead. But can we tell the difference between these and ISIS? I'm not quite sure.
No, it's interesting. Well, if they're having a go at Yemen, of course, we've now got the probable site of the next conflict, which is Morocco. So we've got the UN clearly starting to try and destabilise Morocco. by accusing the Moroccans of occupation of Western Sahara. That goes back, I think, to 1975 or thereabouts. But Morocco generally stable, although some incidents taking place in the country. But now in comes the UN and starts to attack and destabilise the government. And we just remind you, of course, that here he is. Here is Mr. Peter Sutherland, Goldman Sachs banker, also chairman of BP as well. Very busy man. But he's part of the very UN, which is saying that we need to create all this mass migration in order to help build the European Union. It's pretty obvious what's going on here, Mike. We are deliberately destabilising countries to cause mayhem in order to build the European Union. And as you rightly pointed out, where's the policy coming from? It's coming from the United Nations. Well, what we need is a quality politician to solve the problem. So we just thought we'd jump back to Tony Blair, because he says that if you're unemployed, it's totally wrong to complain that migrants are taking your job, and it's up to you to get a better education and skills. It's your fault. It's nothing to do with his government. It's your fault, and you need to get better educated. So if we have a look through, he says at a conference, this was a few days ago in Dubai, he said that migration had fueled right-wing populism. The whole debate around migration is really difficult for people. I've been struggling to understand it, Mike, until I discovered that it was the likes of the bankers and Mr. Sutherland that were creating it. So there's no point in just dismissing it as prejudice, although a lot is. Education is the key. So Tony Blair says we're going to educate refugees entering the countries and those that are already there. The host country is going to be educated. And if you're having a little bit of a moan, it's your fault and you need to get yourself educated. So the arrogance is breathtaking. But of course, let's bring in Goldman Sachs, the bank working alongside George Osborne, and just remind ourselves that this gentleman is saying we need the mass migration. And I think actually let's stop blaming the immigrants and let's blame those lying, duplicitous politicians and bankers who've created the mess in the first place. The evidence is overwhelming, Mike.
Yes.
I'm almost at the stage of saying, how can we get the message out to people? Well, let's come into the BBC because they're always reliable. And here we are, a great headline, migrant crisis. There's many issues in the way of the EU-Turkey deal. And then they give us some good statistics. So since January 2015, 1 million migrants and refugees have entered the EU, and more than 132,000 have arrived this year alone. That, of course, is major tragedy, isn't it, Mike, for the migrants, for the countries concerned, for the infrastructure. This is a disaster. It says Europe has not covered itself with glory in how, as a union of 28 member states with 500 million citizens, it has struggled with fairly sharing the burden. But the lie is the European Union created this problem in the first place. And I'm going to keep bringing in one of the key players, Goldman Sachs, the man now, or the bank now determining Britain's budget, firmly behind the disaster over immigrants. What more can we say?
Don't think anything else needs to be said.
Absolutely not. But the other part of the budget was we need to be smarter. And according to David Cameron, of course, IT, information technology, is going to save us. Well, this is a classic example of what he's unleashed, which is chaos. So Nottingham City Council lawyers are boasting that they didn't really have the budgets for a proper system. So can you believe this? We got hold of some old council laptops, dusted them off, cobbled them together, and then we said to the local magistrates, can we push our data through that? They, of course, said, yes, please do. But he did say there is just one vulnerability, and that's we're using memory sticks.
This is sensitive information on memory sticks, which can be dropped, left on trains.
Whose computers? Were the computers clean? Do they have paedophile information on? Nobody knows. So this is mayhem being unleashed. within the court system, and I'm sure we'll be able to get John Hurst to cover. So let's have a look at this. In the NHS comes the IT. So Jeremy Hunt's just magicked 1.8 billion for a paperless NHS. This is part of the comment. Now, this is taken from the article. I found it confusing because it says, in addition, another 1 billion would be spent bolstering cybersecurity and patient data consent. Is that another billion in addition to the 1.8 billion? I don't know. But it says a further 750 million would be spent upgrading out of hospital care and medicines, etc., and 400 improved digital services. Well, bring in this because we've got a local authority here appointing BT in a 10 million digital health data project. And what did they say? Well, Islington must transform the use and publication of information to patients' residents. We're not going to make them better, we're just going to transform the use and publication of information. But I did notice in the picture, we've got a doctor playing with his tablet. We've got some of the medical staff playing with what looks like a drug box. And almost out of sight, there appears to be a patient waiting in the background. So I thought the image was pretty realistic.
Reminds me of Yes Minister, that how well the hospitals would run if there were no patients.
We don't want the patients, Mike. They're going to be paperless, patientless, just sucking in huge amounts of money for private corporations. Well, if you think that is bad, we need to go north of the border. This is the heart of the beast. We've got a BBC article saying Scottish Government error gave council middle managers covert powers. So the Justice Secretary, Michael Matheson, said middle managers had wrongly been given the power to deploy juveniles and vulnerable people as covert human intelligence sources. Do you understand what that means? For those who don't, what it means is that children and vulnerable people have been used to spy on other individuals. And who has started this process? Middle managers who shouldn't have had that power in the first place. So it affects 32 councils, as well as Marine Scotland, the Scottish Prison Service, Transport Scotland, Common Services Agency, prisons, and that includes the private companies Serco and Sodexo. And what have they been looking at? Well, everything: health records, communication with parliamentarians and journalists.
Wow.
So if you're doing your research, these people are spying on you. But of course, the BBC doesn't really think the whole thing is dangerous because according to their breaking news, SeaWorld is going to end its breeding programme. So well done, the BBC. They're into the hot stuff. And this is what they're saying. Don't worry about this. It's just the wrong people accessed your information. And as you've pointed out, Mike, this is all part of REPA. So this is the reality of Theresa May's legislation. The state is already spying on everything you do, including letters to politicians. But this idiot says it's highly unlikely that any of these bodies will have made authorities which would have required references. So basically they're saying it was all a mistake, don't worry. And they've agreed a solution with Lord Judge.
Really?
So we've got a single party in Scotland, we've got a single police state, we've got no separation of the powers, and now some irk in your local council has been given the power to see your medical records or to ask or to view the email that you sent to a journalist. Here's the man, Lord Judge. We don't know a lot about him. We don't even know how judges are appointed because the Judicial Appointments Commission doesn't really want to speak to the UK column at the moment. So we'd like to know what are the interests of this man? What are his allegiances? What's his morality? And who put him there? Well, of course, he was appointed by David Cameron. And shall we just remind ourselves of part of the spying system set up by David Cameron and Francis Maude, linked in with GCHQ, Cabinet Office and Israel. But unfortunately, this massive spying system doesn't seem to be able to identify paedophiles.
You would think that Cameron's personal protection officers would have identified that particular paedophile before they let him touch David Cameron in that way?
Well, Matthew Byrne, common purpose paedophile, read the story about the man, utterly vile and vicious, what he did. But we've got this massive state spying apparatus, and nobody actually knows what these naughty paedophiles are up to. We can spy on Yemen, we can spy on Syria, President Assad, but in England, apparently, Scotland, rest of UK, these systems just don't seem to be able to pick up the paedophiles. It's remarkable, Mike, isn't it?
It could be, as Kincora alleges, it could be because some of them are involved in the security services themselves. But anyway, this is from June last year. In fact, the story begins in February last year because leave was requested for a judicial review into the Kincora boys' home scandal because basically the government was trying to say that couldn't fall under the remit of the Goddard inquiry because child abuse has been devolved, apparently. So because child abuse is devolved, then it was up to the Northern Irish government to investigate this, and this was brought to judicial review. Leave was obtained, and it actually went for judicial review in June last year, which is what this article is about. And there was supposed to be a judgment on that. September at the earliest, but certainly wasn't expected to be later than October. That was pushed back until today, actually. But I've just seen Patrick Horgan here tweeting out that the judgment in the High Court Judicial Review, which was expected today, has been rescheduled to April the 8th. So it's been pushed back once again. Delay.
Yeah.
And the question is, will Kincora actually be part of the Goddard inquiry? Now, of course, the government says that it shouldn't be because child abuse is devolved. But on the other hand, because Northern Ireland was special circumstances, and in fact, British, there were operators from not only the military but the security services from London working in Belfast, then in my view, it should be part of the central inquiry.
Yeah, divided up though is the way that you break it up and you start to blur the boundaries. That's over the boundary, we can't deal with that.
It's perfect to devolve this stuff if you want to cover up, isn't it?
Cover up. But not to worry, because as we've been reporting, the UN and the British government is actually really concerned with our happiness. The BBC, very big on happiness, which is why it produces so many depressing and morbid programmes. But Denmark is apparently the happiest country. I think that's because they got the Kinnocks married to the Prime Minister.
Right.
I should imagine that would be what cheered them up. But apparently Greece is not so happy. And the BBC put up this picture and they said that national happiness in Greece has been a tad undermined, apparently, by continuing political and financial uncertainty. Not the country is in utter turmoil as a result of being undermined by the European Union. And for anybody who wonders, the European flag with a swastika in it is not an image that we've implanted over the top of that banner. That's the picture as it appears on the BBC. So clearly somebody in Greece really understands why they're not happy, and that's because the European Union to them appears like a new Nazi regime. But we'll add this bit because the report happened to be compiled by the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network, and it used Gallup World Poll data from 1,000 people in each country every year for 3 years. Well, the Sustainable Development part of the UN is just happens to be the very same organisation that, of course, Sir Peter Sutherland sits in, the man who's been responsible with others for unbelievable suffering through the rooting up of people and mass migration.
We seem to have had a thread running through this whole programme.
We have, and in fact I'd like to say to our viewers and listeners, it is so obvious now what is taking place. Treason, Britain being dismantled, public infrastructure, strategic infrastructure being dismantled, and there's no question that the EU referendum is a scam. It doesn't matter whether people vote in or out. The politicians are going to keep the pro-EU agenda going. If you think we've done a good job this morning so far this afternoon, beg your pardon, in showing what's going on, please will you help put out the links, tweet, email, and get other people woken up. At that point, we're going to take a very short break, just show you what Ian Crane has got planned at AV7, and then I'll be joined by John Hurst.
The Alternative View Conference presents AV7 Humanity Rising. Speakers include Ian R. Crane, Thomas Sheridan, Patrick Henningsen, Max Egan, Zen Gardner, Dr. Graham Downing, Willem Felderhoff, Field McConnell, Vanessa Beeley, Michael Shrimpton, Fiona Burns. 13th to the 15th of May 2016, Horwood House, near Milton Keynes. Book online at alternativeview.co.uk or call 0207 558 8869. AV7, bringing together some of the most inspirational agents of real change.
Honestly, I've spoken at a lot of gigs, and I'd say this is the best gig that I've spoken at, just because of the lineup of speakers.
Well, hello. As you can see, I'm now joined by John Hurst from the British Constitution Group. For those of you that do not know him, John has been a very big campaigner for many years on the subject of the Constitution and common law. And of course, he's got enormous experience as a former policeman, police constable, in fact.
That's the point I make, yes, yeah.
Okay, so more or less, we're going to give John a free hand here to give an update. He's going to have a look at council tax, regulatory reform, and ultimately tell us about Northern Ireland policeman Anthony Carlin. Over to you.
Thank you. I've got some requests for assistance, as I normally do. Researching on council tax and the comprehensive annual financial report concept, could I draw to your attention Red Ice Radio interview of Sophia Smallstorm? She's recently been interviewed, and she's got one suggestion about what the function of unusable reserves is. She thinks it's a place where central government grants go for projects such as Agenda 21, or 2130 as it now is. And she also says there's scope for corruption in that some money is diverted into other things, for example, investigating investments in derivatives and also staff pension funds. So could I ask you to have a look at that, and then apply the information which she gives you to your local council? It's probably self-explanatory when you listen to the Red Ice Radio broadcast.
But I'll just add into that, John, we had our local UK column meeting last night, very well attended. Thank you very much to everybody who turned up. One of the points that came up was what could people be doing? And one of the gentlemen there said, people need to be challenging wherever they can, get in a challenge. And this, of course, is a very easy one to do within your own district, is to challenge the local councils as to the size and use of their reserves.
Yes, that's right. And the concept is that if the council has got cuts and they're not complying with a statutory obligation, for example, education, then you've got an arguable case you can take to court. It's already been done. The two Welsh ladies in 2013, they had children that reached the age of 3 and they were due for 10 hours nursery education. The council had a cut, so they didn't get it. So they go to the Court of Queen's Bench sitting at Cardiff, and the court says, of course you've got to have this education, and the council will correct it. So that's what we're looking at. I will guide anybody that wants to go through that process. My email via the BCG. The next subject is regulatory reform. A group coordinated by John Timbrell was seeking to make use of an Act of Parliament, which I'd overlooked. It's the Legislative and Regulatory Reform Act 2006. What that says is ministers of the Crown are given the power to reduce or remove burdens. So Section 1 says, a Minister of the Crown may by order under this section make any provision which he considered will serve the purpose in subsection 2. So what does subsection 2 say? The purpose is removing or reducing any burden or their overall burdens resulting directly or indirectly from any legislation. That's quite dramatic when you think about it, burden reduced from any legislation. One, for example, that springs to mind is the right to bear arms. That's the one I'm going to personally progress. One is speeding legislation. As you know, local authorities have partnerships so-called safety camera partnerships with the police and the courts. And it's basically a ploy to collect tax, isn't it? And it's unnecessary regulation. The reason it's unnecessary regulation is about 10 years ago, about 15 years ago now, two policemen who were traffic division, and they're experts on that particular topic. They did some research and they found what they called the 85th percentile rule, and they found that any piece of road, time of day, road conditions, weight of traffic, there was a natural speed that 85% of people would stick to and be safe. And about that time, the EU imposed speed limits, but on a bullseye system. Start with the middle of the city, and it's 20 miles an hour, and then rings go out 30, 40, 50. And they found that accidents increased when the speed limit was different to the natural speed of the road. Because people are looking at the speedo and braking and the inchworm effects and tail enders and so on. There's an example. If you can think of any others, unnecessary regulation, here's an opportunity. John Timbrell appears to be coordinating the group. If you want to know any more, email me and I'll add you to the list. And the important thing is, a Minister of the Crown may by order. Now, may in the statute, you've heard me say this before, I dare say, may can be must when a body is required to exercise a right. So in theory, we could insist that regulations be reduced on the basis of this Act of Parliament from 2006. So that's quite a handy thing. And if anybody's got any suggestions about topics that are of interest to them, then let us know.
Can I add in there, personal opinion, but it does seem to me that every time somebody asks or challenges the system in this way, of course, it's not just the effect of your local authority or the police responding. They're going to be talking to their legal teams. The legal teams are going to be talking up the chain towards the government. So this ultimately puts huge pressure on the government itself just by asking a question at the bottom of the chain.
Well, a classic one is health and safety and policing. I was serving when health and safety was applied to the police force, and that's why you get the situation where people would be drowned while policemen watched. Never happened in my day, has happened now. It's because health and safety was foolishly applied to the police force.
Yeah.
The next subject is Anthony Carlin. Anthony Carlin was given 12 months imprisonment with a 50% discount, which everyone gets. He's due out early in April. There are three issues outstanding with Anthony's case. The first one is a possible appeal to the Queen's Bench about the legality of him being locked up. It's constable's rights versus court's rights. Courts exercise common law or jurisdiction, and so does a constable. It's an irresistible force and immovable object, and it hasn't been settled. And Anthony could well appeal over the heads to the Court of Queen's Bench, which is the common law court, to get the chief constable to support him. Because basically Anthony made the arrest.
As a police officer, for those that don't recognise the name, Anthony Carlin, as a Northern Ireland police officer, he made the arrest of a judge in court, and that was verbally, I am arresting you.
Yes, that's right, and stepped forward and was obstructed by court staff. The reason that he made the arrest is that the judge in question, giving a judgment, deviated from the material that the case was about. Bear in mind, it's the second highest judge in Northern Ireland. It'd been up through the food chain. All the subsidiary judges thought there was a case to answer, and then suddenly this particular one said there wasn't, and started basically abusing Anthony and saying this is nonsense and you can't do this. And that's the point where Anthony exercised his power to step in. Anthony wanted to arrest the judge and seize the case papers, and then make a report to in Northern Ireland. They have a discipline body for judges for dealing with them. He wouldn't have put him in front of a court because, as you probably know, since 1701 judges have immunity. It doesn't mean they can't be sacked. They can be sacked by a resolution of both houses of Parliament. So what should have happened is that Anthony should have done a report to the discipline committee, judicial discipline committee, and that should have been considered by Parliament. That's not over yet. The other thing to say, that the matter for which he was arrested was subsidiary to his successful rebuttal of a Santander Bank attempt to foreclose on his home. He was able to prove that the bank had perjured themselves. They'd sold the mortgage, principally. He was able to prove it. And it meant that there was no case to answer because the person who owned the mortgage wasn't the person that was taking him to court. So that's still outstanding. We remain to see what's going to happen with that one. That's quite important for sort of many people down the land.
But this comes straight on to the subject that the whole of the mortgage industry is a fraudulent scam.
Yes, yeah, that's right. One of the things we discovered, I've mentioned previously, is that judgments from Southern Ireland are apparently binding on the mainland. And there's a judgment from Southern Ireland to that effect. If a mortgage is sold, the debt's expunged, and the original mortgage company can't come after you. So I've got two high-profile cases where people are actually going to progress that. I'll progress it. I'll keep you posted. The third one is any police discipline hearing, because I'm sure the police in Northern Ireland will want to review his conduct, and it remains to be seen how they deal with that. Police discipline hearings are internal, but he's entitled to legal representation, and his argument is going to be, I made a lawful arrest, you can't touch me for it. It remains to be seen how that happens. Right, grand juries. I've written an article on what's happened to it. John Gallows had a copy. Ed Beck, one of the grand jury cases, the firearms case, he's going for a voluntary bill of indictment of the Chief Constable of Hertfordshire in order to secure his rights, because he's had Arms for Defence, which is he's a farmer and he's had them to defend his property, vermin control. The second case that's going before the courts is Guy Taylor's. Guy, we did lodge his case in front of the magistrates at Warwick, but it bounced back and they said, oh, this is a collateral attack. So we had to remind ourselves what a collateral attack was. What they mean is the legal principle that only one strand of court action can be dealt with at a time. Guy got himself deliberately arrested for criminal trespass, and then appealed, and that was still running. So we're now going to put his in front of the court. We're going to do that via the magistrates' court, because the magistrates' court, or the officials at the magistrates' court in Worcester are quite helpful.
Right. This is good.
And the third one that's running is another grand jury case is Mike Grant Sinclair. Unfortunately, he's been very ill. He's been ill for about 3 months. So we laid it before the Luton magistrates. He hasn't been able to progress it, and he's now better. He nearly died apparently. He's now better, and we were deciding whether to leave it before the Luton magistrates or go for the voluntary bill of indictment. I'll just talk about the voluntary bill of indictment. I didn't know about it until a well-wisher sent me some law books, and what it says is a judge of the High Court can on hearing an information, send a case to the Crown Court for jury trial. There are various rules about it, and one of the rules is when there's no alternative or other alternative methods have been tried and not succeeded. So in the cases that have been bounced, for example, the Linda Lewis one from South Wales, that should really go to the High Court as well. So we're seeking to negotiate with about that one, aren't we, Brian? So,
indeed.
It's nearly a year since the conference. I did say this wouldn't be a fast process. It hasn't been, but it's not forgotten.
And we can also say, judging by the reaction from the court system itself, the judicial system, that it's caused great consternation.
Well, the cases have been fed up the food chain. I'm sure that's why they take time to respond. And it is an adversarial legal system, as I said before, and it needs somebody to put their head above the parapet, and that's what we've done. And each person in the food chain is a potential recruit to the right, aren't they? To recruit to doing the right thing.
The right side.
The right side,
We have to be
yeah.
a bit specific there, because there's many people that the moment you try and challenge the system, you've got to be extreme and right wing. So we're saying on the side of truth, on the side of right. Yeah.
On the subject of Lord Justice Judge, I mean, he had a good reputation previously. His surname is Judge, so he's Judge. He had a good reputation, but you asked the question, well, how a judge is appointed. Did some research a few years ago. There's a Judicial Appointment Committee, which is basically run by the Prime Minister, so it's political, and that's the problem. And if I remember correctly, Lord Mandelson's grandfather was chair of it a few years ago, and of course anything to do with Mandelson.
Yeah. We'll leave the pause there. Well, of course, what's interesting, I have an email exchange ongoing at the moment where I've just asked the question, who appoints the Judicial Appointments Commission? And it's suddenly become very grey, and I'm being passed around quite quickly. So I think this is the point when we can see that the judges are appointed politically, there's no independence at all in the system, and the whole thing is exposed. All right, well, John, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, all of our viewers and listeners for joining us. If you like what we do and you're not a subscriber as yet, perhaps you consider becoming a subscriber or making a donation. We can only do what we do on a daily basis with your help and support. We'll be back same time tomorrow, joined by David Scott of Northern Exposure, and I'm sure we'll be having a look at that article of the Scottish state simply spying on people. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.